Childhood friendship in New York. Emily Carter and Rachel Miller met on the very first day of kindergarten in Westchester County, just outside New York City. Emily was a shy, bookish girl with a wild curiosity and a knack for computers, while Rachel was outgoing, fearless, and impossible to ignore. Somehow, despite their differences, the two instantly clicked over a shared love of mystery novels and an ambition that set them apart from the rest of their classmates. Growing up in tree-lined neighborhoods, filled with stately homes and the constant hum of city ambition, Emily and Rachel quickly became inseparable. From endless afternoons at the local park, plotting imaginary adventures, to late-night phone calls, confiding secrets, and teenage dreams, their friendship weathered every phase of growing up. When Emily's parents divorced during middle school, it was Rachel who slipped quietly into her room with ice cream and comforting silence. And when Rachel struggled with math, it was Emily who patiently explained equations until the problems started to make sense. In high school, the duo built their very first business together, a tutoring service for neighborhood kids. Emily managed the website and scheduling. Rachel handled advertising and charming the parents. Their small venture quickly became the talk of the town, sparking inside jokes about one day building an empire in Manhattan. Yet, beneath the laughter and loyalty, subtle differences began to emerge. Emily revered honesty and longed for recognition based on her dedication and talent. Rachel, for all her warmth, was deeply competitive and yearned for the thrill of being in the spotlight, sometimes blurring the lines to get ahead. Still, whenever tensions rose, they always found their way back to each other, convinced that nothing could truly come between them. Throughout those formative years, the bright lights of New York City loomed just a train ride away. The city became the backdrop of their shared ambition and wildest plans. Sneaking in to watch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, afternoons at Central Park, and wide-eyed trips to see Wall Street's towering offices. Collectively, New York wasn't just home. It represented limitless opportunity and the promise that, as long as they stuck together, anything was possible. By the time they both earned acceptance letters to Columbia University, it felt like destiny had already written the next chapter. Emily and Rachel promised each other they wouldn't just survive the city. They'd conquer it, side by side. They truly believed their friendship was unbreakable. The startup and first success. After graduating from Columbia University, both Emily and Rachel were brimming with possibilities in a city where the skyline seemed to promise anything was attainable for those bold enough to try. The years of shared dreams and joint projects led naturally to a new ambition, launching their own tech startup. Emily, ever the innovator, had spent her senior year developing a financial technology platform that made investing more accessible for young people. Rachel, with her unmatched charisma and networking skills, was the first person Emily pitched her idea to, and her first official partner. They named their company Empowerly, a nod to their desire to change not just the way people invested, but who could play the game. Their Manhattan apartment doubled as their first office. Laptops perched between coffee mugs, brainstorming sessions that lasted deep into the night, and sticky notes covering every inch of wall space. Rachel thrived in the city's networking events and investor mixers, quickly building a buzz about two young women shaking up the male-dominated fintech world. Emily, meanwhile, dove into coding and problem-solving, often losing track of time as she refined every line of code and feature. Their complementary strengths became the company's greatest asset. Within months, Empowerly landed its first round of seed funding, an achievement celebrated with late-night pizza and laughter echoing off their high-rise windows. Soon after, press outlets picked up their story. Two best friends disrupting Wall Street, making finance cool and fair for the next generation. The company began to grow rapidly. Emily took charge of building the tech team and setting a relentless standard for product excellence. Rachel became the face of the company, giving interviews, negotiating partnerships, and charming even the most skeptical investors. Their dynamic meant long hours, high stress, and the occasional disagreement, especially when stakes were high. But each time, they found common ground and renewed trust. This first run of success brought both exhilaration and new pressures. Emily relished the chance to see her ideas come to life and earn respect in her field, but she sometimes struggled with Rachel's growing appetite for attention and the risks she took to keep press and investors happy. Rachel, in turn, felt alive in the midst of competition and relished seeing their story splashed across business magazines. Yet beneath Rachel's dazzling confidence, there were shadows. A hunger for validation, a simmering jealousy each time Emily received quiet praise from the tech community. Still, the two friends clung to the belief that their hard work and loyalty could weather anything. True to their teenage promise, they had not only survived New York, they were on track to conquer it together. The shadow of betrayal. Success, as it turned out, was a double-edged sword. Empowerly's meteoric rise transformed Emily and Rachel from ambitious outsiders to industry darlings, featured in glossy magazines and debated in boardrooms up and down Wall Street. Investors lined up for meetings. Tech journalists began referring to them as the power duo. The flurry of recognition, however, didn't just amplify their triumphs. It magnified cracks and pitfalls that might have otherwise gone unnoticed. Inside the glass and steel offices that now housed Empowerly's growing team, Emily thrived in her element. Her days consumed by product development, user feedback, and late-night troubleshooting sessions with her hand-picked engineers. Rachel, meanwhile, was the company's radiant public face, headlining panels about women in tech, schmoozing at every downtown rooftop mixer, and charming everyone from venture capitalists to skeptical reporters. If Emily was the backbone, Rachel was the magnetic draw, and for a while, that balance worked. But as the company matured and the stakes soared, Rachel's competitive streak transformed from a friendly edge to a palpable ambition that colored every decision. A new breed of investor had entered the scene. Sharp, unsentimental, watching the bottom line more than the story. Under the guise of perpetual hustle, Rachel became more secretive, spending long hours in closed-door meetings, promising Emily she was negotiating the next big thing. Emily, exhausted but trusting, let it slide. Rachel had always been the risk-taker, the mover and shaker. Still, things began to change. It started with subtle slights. Rachel interrupted meetings to take private calls, nodded along distractedly to Emily's technical updates, and, bit by bit, began to refer to her company in interviews. When Emily raised concerns about several aggressive deals Rachel was pushing for, ones that might sacrifice their mission for short-term growth, Rachel brushed her off. "It's just business," Rachel said. "We both want what's best for Empowerly. You handle the product. Let me strategize." Emily reassured herself with memories of their shared childhood, years spent dreaming beside the Hudson River, pledging loyalty over pizza on apartment floors. But one sleepless night, she discovered a folder on their shared company drive. One marked Legal Review, filled with contracts and board proposals she hadn't seen before. Her heart pounded as she read through the files. terms that diluted her voting rights, transferred critical intellectual property, and, most hauntingly, aimed to install Rachel as CEO outright. Before Emily could confront her, Rachel was already 3 steps ahead. One fateful Friday, Emily was summoned to a meeting with senior investors, purportedly to finalize funding for a new product line. Rachel sat across the oak conference table, immaculate in a navy power suit, a flat smile barely hiding her nerves. The meeting, Emily soon realized, was a setup. Investors fired questions about product timelines and financial projections, numbers Emily had never approved. When Emily hesitated, Rachel jumped in, answering for her, flattering and reassuring the investors. Later, Rachel pulled Emily aside with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "This is bigger than us now. Don't take it personally." The following week became a blur of corporate maneuvers. Lawyers filtered into Empowerly's offices with briefcases and wary looks. Emily was bombarded with documents, NDAs, amendments, releases, each more convoluted than the last. Rachel pleaded, "Trust me, just sign. It's standard procedure. I'd never do anything to hurt you." Struggling against a whirlwind of anxiety and a deep, desperate wish to believe her friend, Emily relented. With each signature, she unknowingly relinquished what little control she had left. By Monday, it was over. The board, now stacked with Rachel's allies, voted to remove Emily from her own project. Her company email blinked out. Her keycard was deactivated by noon. Former colleagues averted their eyes as Emily shuffled out with a cardboard box, her reputation left stinging in the stagnant air. The news broke within hours. Empowerly parts ways with co-founder amid strategic shift. Articles speculated about Emily's lack of leadership and creative differences. Ugly euphemisms for betrayal. No press release could soften. Social media whispered theories. Some blaming Emily as a technocrat who never understood the business. Rachel, poised and sorrowful, made the rounds on television. It was a tough decision. "We owe Emily a lot, but the company must move forward." Numb and exhausted, Emily retreated into herself. She watched Rachel blossom in the spotlight, now alone on Empowerly's billboards, and quoted as a visionary leader. Rachel's old warmth was now expertly staged. Public displays of gratitude to her co-founder, crafted for applause in trending hashtags. In her solitary apartment overlooking the city that once inspired all her dreams, Emily faced the darkness that comes with total loss. She cycled through stages of disbelief, rage, profound sadness, and a clarity sharper than grief. Rachel hadn't just taken her company. She'd rewritten their shared story, casting Emily as a footnote. She tried reaching out to mutual friends, only to be met with awkward silences, unanswered messages, or polite refusals. Most chose to side with Rachel, whose public narrative was compelling, and who still signed their paychecks. Yet in the hours between sunset and dawn, Emily's disbelief hardened into resolve. Betrayal, she realized, comes not from strangers, but from those who know your heart best. She scoured legal documents, traced digital footprints, and pieced together the backroom deals and alliances that led to her downfall. Her anger became fuel. Her analytical mind, always her greatest asset, now bent on understanding every detail of her expulsion. Those endless nights, lit only by the blue glow of her laptop, were less about mourning the past and more about reclaiming her future. Bit by bit, she mapped the contours of Rachel's plan. Shell companies, hidden stock sales, forged signatures disguised by expedited procedure. Emily, for the first time in years, was utterly alone, but she wasn't broken. Eventually, with little left to tie her to New York, Emily left the city she once called her own. Rachel continued to thrive in the headlines, but a new name had started appearing on obscure tech blogs in San Francisco. A brilliant, enigmatic entrepreneur stirring up the startup scene. Claire Dawson. Emily's reinvention was underway, hidden in plain sight, with hard lessons burned into every step. If Rachel had taught her one thing, it was this: trust is the rarest commodity in a city built on ambition. And payback, Emily resolved, would be best served silent and sharp. The sort of justice only a former friend could deliver. Collapse and disappearance. Emily's fall from the summit of New York's startup scene was as dramatic as her rise. One day, she was a celebrated innovator, hailed by tech blogs and business journals alike. The next, she was a cautionary headline. The stories were merciless. Ousted founder loses control after boardroom coup. Was she ever really the visionary? The news cycle pounced on the spectacle, recycling sound bites from Rachel's interviews, dissecting every move. The city's admiration morphed overnight into a cold, skeptical scrutiny. The phones stopped ringing. Investors she once called friends vanished behind polite, non-committal emails. Invitations to panels, conferences, and networking dinners dissolved. Her name faded from Empowerly's website. Billboards that once featured her smiling face now showed only Rachel, poised, successful, flanked by a rotating cast of new C-level executives. It was as if Emily's contributions, her late nights, her code, her vision, had all been erased. The most devastating loss wasn't public. It came in quiet betrayals from within her inner circle. Close colleagues who avoided her gaze in the elevator. Longtime collaborators suddenly too busy for coffee. Even the building's security guards, who used to greet her by name, stiffly asking for her visitor's badge. The company she'd poured her soul into now felt hostile and unrecognizable. Back in her modest apartment, Emily moved through her days in a haze. The city outside was relentless with its usual noise and glitz. But for her, its rhythms now felt hollow, unfamiliar. She spent hours just staring at her laptop, a blank email draft flickering on her screen. She drafted apology after apology to her parents out in Connecticut, explaining that things had changed at work, never daring to tell them the full, humiliating truth. Her mother, sensing pain, called daily. Emily often stared at the ringing phone, unable to answer. It was the isolation, more than the financial loss, that cut deepest. The friends she'd trusted most were silent. Her inbox was eerily empty, except for legal notifications, final severance agreements, notices of restricted access, requests for transition of any lingering accounts. Plagued by insomnia, Emily wandered the city at night, lost in crowds that didn't recognize her, tracing old routes past Columbia's campus, along the Hudson River, scenes from a different life. Sometimes she would pass Empowerly's offices in Midtown, gaze up at the brightly lit windows, and realize, with a kind of dull despair, that she'd become just another anonymous New Yorker staring in from the cold. But the humiliation wasn't over. Rachel's PR machine was relentless, spinning the story to favor her at every turn. Strategic realignment, a mature decision to move forward with a singular vision. Whenever journalists reached out to Emily for comment, the questions seemed pre-written to trap her. Was she difficult to work with? Had she let her personal friendship with Rachel interfere with business? Did she resent being replaced by someone more dynamic? Emily quickly learned to say nothing, fearing her words would be twisted to worsen her public image. Rumors festered online. Some claimed Emily had voluntarily stepped back due to health reasons. Others said she'd sabotaged her own company out of spite. People gossiped, loudly, frequently, and without mercy. Blogs pounced. Armchair analysts dissected her every choice from afar. And even tech podcasts, which once fought to feature her, turned their nostalgia into backhanded criticism. It was clear from day one Emily wasn't a people person, declared a viral thread, conveniently forgetting the years she'd spent building bridges and inspiring new talent. Bills mounted. Without her salary, living in Manhattan quickly became untenable. Empowerly's lawyers, keen to cut all ties, disqualified her from any meaningful stock options. Her former apartment, once a sanctuary, bustling with post-midnight brainstorms and shared pizza slices with Rachel, became a claustrophobic cell. Photographs of their early days, smiling faces, sticky notes, Empowerly, dream bigger, scrawled in marker, were packed away or thrown out in sporadic bursts of anger. In her lowest moments, thoughts of escape grew louder. She searched for gigs under aliases, fearful that any new employer would see her name and link her to the scandal. Sleepless and anxious, she haunted obscure coffee shops, writing lines of code for freelance projects that barely paid the rent. Trusted contacts in New York had all vanished. At her most paranoid, she suspected one or two had gone out of their way to keep her name blacklisted. Sometimes, she would read online comments under articles about Empowerly, numbingly scrolling past cruel jokes and wild, unfounded theories about her failure. Still, a stubborn flame burned in her chest. In the silence of those endless nights, across city blocks layered in snow or the oppressive heat of a New York summer, Emily began to plot. But this time, she told herself, there would be no room for second chances or misplaced trust. With nothing left to lose, she resolved to disappear, utterly and completely, from the life that had betrayed her. Emily made her preparations with cold precision. She closed out all her accounts, cut all ties, deleted her social media, disposed of her SIM card, shredded anything that bore her signature. She liquidated what little stock she'd managed to retain, moved out of her apartment in the dead of night, and quietly redirected her mail to a P.O. box under a false name. She even changed her look, dyed her hair dark, adopted a purposeful stiffness to her stride, bought wardrobe staples that wouldn't attract attention. To the world, it would look like she'd simply vanished, a victim of another startup fairy tale gone wrong. Yet as she left New York behind, taking a late-night red-eye nearly empty, except for business travelers and the occasional insomniac, she was not running from her past. She was moving toward an uncharted future. On the flight west, as the city lights blinked out below her, Emily allowed herself one small, defiant hope. What Rachel and the world never understood was this: resilience is its own kind of genius. What had been taken from her, her work, her friends, her reputation, had forged a new alloy inside her. The vulnerabilities of before had become sharpened tools. Her heartbreak, a silent engine. She landed in San Francisco before dawn, anonymous among the throngs of commuters and expats bustling through SFO's terminals. Here, names could be invented, stories could be rewritten, and history, painful as it was, could be used as material for the future. Emily Carter vanished that morning. In her place, as the city's mist curled around the Golden Gate and the first rays of light painted the bay, a new figure began to emerge, Claire Dawson. Where others saw humiliation, Emily, now Claire, saw an opportunity. Disappearance is never about erasing your past. It's about learning from every wound, collecting every scar as a lesson, and returning, when the time is right, stronger than ever. Reinvention, with a new identity in San Francisco. Under the gray sweep of an early morning sky, The BART subway thundered beneath San Francisco as Claire Dawson, once Emily Carter, stood at a station platform, her one suitcase and battered laptop bag her only belongings. What Manhattan had offered in magnitude and brutality, the Bay Area responded to with fresh zeal, anonymity, and the lure of endless possibility. Here on the West Coast, no one knew her history or betrayal. She was just another dreamer among thousands who came searching for their second and sometimes third act. Claire's transformation was not just cosmetic, though the changes were dramatic. Her hair, once sun-kissed and long, was now a short, deep brown bob. She wore oversized glasses, swapped out tailored city blazers for cozy sweaters and retro jeans, rebooted her posture into purposeful, brisk confidence. But far more than her appearance, it was Claire's mindset that marked the rebirth. If New York had once made her believe in raw ambition and the promise of loyalty, San Francisco gave her something subtler. A canvas upon which she could draw new boundaries, shape new values, and chart her own course, free from the resonance of Rachel's betrayal. The quiet beginnings. Landing in a tiny sublet studio in Lower Haight, Claire kept to herself at first, working long nights on freelance gigs to cover the rent and avoid dipping into her hard-won savings. She registered for tech meetups under her new name. Always careful, always watchful. The world of Bay Area tech was tight-knit. Venture capitalists, startup founders, and journalists met over blue bottle coffee or in crowded co-working spaces, trading ideas, inventions, and rumors. Still, Claire understood how to move in the shadows. She avoided any mention of fintech or the East Coast, and never once slipped up when people asked, "So where are you from, Claire?" Within weeks, Claire noticed something different about Silicon Valley's energy. Its optimism. While New York thrived on competition and power, San Francisco thrived on hope and disruption. Here, people wore failure like a badge, expecting to crash and burn again and again before finally catching fire. At first, this rawness caught Claire off guard. In New York, her downfall had made her a pariah. In the Bay Area, her mysterious air was an asset, and her obsession with data, code, and problem-solving marked her as a rising star. Building from the ashes, with no one to trust but herself, Claire poured her energy into new projects. She started with tiny contracts, fixing buggy code, consulting on back-end architecture for struggling teams, reviewing security protocols for early-stage startups. Her work was seamless, tidy, and remarkably efficient, traits that didn't go unnoticed. Soon enough, a pair of young founders at a robotics incubator offered her a spot on their advisory board, throwing open the door to new opportunities and connections. Each gig earned her more recommendations, and more importantly, more respect. She'd carefully disabled all trails back to New York. Her Empowerly LinkedIn was long deleted, and any question about her previous life was met with a soft laugh and a quick subject change. "I'm just someone who loves to build things," she'd say. And people believed her. All the while, Claire plotted in silence. Every betrayal she'd suffered, every lesson learned from Empowerly's meteoric rise and fall, became a rule in her newfound manual for survival. She never overshared. She never left a digital footprint she couldn't erase. She trusted no one with her heart or her equity. Yet, for the first time since the coup, hope felt tangible. In this city of second chances, she could imagine not just surviving, but thriving again, on her own terms. The new venture, Nova Pulse. It began, as all great ideas do, with a problem no one else seemed to notice. In the frenetic chase for AI and automation, smaller businesses were being left Behind, priced out and locked out by larger, faster-moving competitors. Claire saw the opportunity in the numbers. Despite VC focus on unicorns, most of America's economy relied on small and medium-sized businesses, yet tech adoption lagged. What if there was a way to democratize AI tools for startups and mom-and-pop shops, offering affordable, secure, customizable platforms that gave everyone a fighting chance? She started Nova Pulse in a rented corner at a Mission co-working space. Her team in the early days was just her, coding, designing, networking, testing, often for 24 hours straight, with no one to bring her coffee or cover her shift the way Rachel once had. She issued her first demo to a local food cooperative, watched as cash flow, inventory, and customer engagement soared, then quietly gathered testimonies and results. Like all things in the Valley, word of mouth and hustle did their magic. Within 6 months, Nova Pulse had a client waiting list, inquiries from 2 different investors, and a Twitter buzz that felt suspiciously familiar. Building new alliances. But Claire was smarter now. She'd meet with investors and partners over Vietnamese noodles or at the Conservatory of Flowers, analyzing every handshake for hidden intent. She turned down flashy offers, refusing to cede control even as term sheets grew larger. This time, the board was hers to choose, and every contract was scrutinized. No more hurried signatures, no more "just trust me." She built a tiny, fiercely loyal engineering team, hiring women and minorities who'd been overlooked elsewhere, echoing the lessons she'd learned from being dispossessed herself. Through tech panels, pitch competitions, and product launches, Claire gained a reputation not only for brilliance and resolve, but for an almost mythic privacy. Curious reporters sometimes tried to probe her backstory, but ran into dead ends. For every "Who is Claire Dawson?" headline, an enigmatic profile followed, full of praise for her grit and visionary thinking, but empty of personal details, echoes of the past. Despite the growing success, the past was never far behind. Occasionally, Claire caught wind of Empowerly and Rachel's escapades through industry gossip, emails from old New York contacts, which she always left unanswered, or news articles celebrating Rachel's next revolutionary project. Sometimes, past investors even reached out, intrigued by Nova Pulse's meteoric rise, never realizing they'd funded its creator before. Each reminder stoked the complex fire inside Claire. Not just bitterness or vengeance, but a razor-sharp determination not to repeat old mistakes. She kept her circle small. She didn't party or confide. Vulnerability, she'd learned, was a luxury founders in her position couldn't afford. Not until the last piece was in place, preparing for the reckoning. 3 years after arriving in San Francisco, Nova Pulse was the name on every startup, Whisper Network's lips. After hours at the company's modest office, never ostentatious, Claire leaned over her laptop, sifting through legal documents and digital traces, plotting. Rachel had molded her into something unbreakable. And now, for the first time, Claire quietly reached out to other New York exiles, wronged by the same circle, longing for justice. As the Bay Area sun set violet behind the city's hills, Claire understood that she wasn't just building a business. She was building a case, an alliance, a new destiny. Her new life was no longer just about survival. It was about reclamation. And when the day came to step from the shadows, Claire would do so stronger, wiser, and unforgiving. Fateful encounters. San Francisco's business world could be both a vast ocean and a tiny village. When Claire Dawson, once Emily Carter, first landed, she relied on that very vastness to disappear. But after years of explosive growth with Nova Pulse, whispers about her work reached beyond the Bay. New York venture capitalists, international strategists, and former rivals began circling the same circles Claire now influenced. It was only a matter of time before old ghosts became flesh. The first encounter came by accident, or so it seemed. Claire was presenting Nova Pulse's new AI-driven small business toolkit at a prominent industry summit. The conference hall buzzed as CEOs and journalists mulled between coffee stands and sponsor booths. Claire, sharpened by years of emotional armor, took the stage, answering tough technical questions and deftly steering the focus onto her company's mission. As she stepped down to polite applause, she spotted a familiar flash of red hair near the press gathering. Rachel Miller, exuding effortless confidence in a tailored cream suit, surrounded by attentive executives. Their eyes met for a millisecond, enough for a pulse of recognition and a storm of memory. Rachel's smile faltered, then quickly recovered. She pivoted and addressed her entourage, but her gaze darted back to Claire, now for just a bit too long. Rachel was serving as keynote speaker for a rival fintech company, Vaulter. The schedules had been arranged for their paths to cross, almost as if by some perverse sense of fate, or perhaps even a touch of cruel design, by event organizers hungry for drama. Developers whispered, journalists circled, and social media buzzed. Could the Rachel Miller really be facing off against the enigmatic Claire Dawson? Their first direct encounter came not on stage, but at a sponsor mixer that evening. The air was thick with posturing and the musky tang of expensive whiskey. Claire felt Rachel's presence before she saw her, a practiced charisma cutting through the crowd. Rachel approached slowly, a glass in hand, and an easy smile designed for onlookers. Claire Dawson, right? Rachel's voice was honeyed, every syllable weighed with hidden meaning. Congratulations on that presentation. Impressive. Nova Pulse is making quite the name. Almost overnight. Claire kept her features neutral. That's kind of you. I keep hearing your company's been busy disrupting, too. There was a pause, brief and electric. Beneath the pleasantries, a hidden calculus played out. Old wounds, concealed strategies, and the unspoken question, do you recognize me, truly?
Right there.
Or have we become strangers clothed in new armor? Their words danced around each other, layered with veiled shots and backhanded compliments. Rachel complimented Nova Pulse's romantic underdog story, sparking laughter from a nearby VC. Claire returned the favor by referencing the agility needed to rebuild a brand after controversy. The subtext, lost on no one who understood the tabloids of their collective past. But it was not just one encounter. As months passed, fate, perhaps abetted by the relentless mechanics of the tech world, threw Claire and Rachel into each other's orbit again and again, at fundraising galas, in closed-door negotiation rooms, during high-profile business pitches, and even at charitable hackathons. Each meeting unfolded with a new blend of tension, strategy, and mutual observation. At a San Mateo accelerator, they unintentionally competed for the same government contract. Rachel's team arrived with glossy brochures, high heels echoing on marble, while Claire's engineers wore sneakers and handed out working prototypes. The judges were captivated by both teams. In the end, Nova Pulse edged out Vaulter by a single point. Rachel's stoic applause and tight jaw captured by a dozen cameras. Another encounter was even more personal. A former Empowerly engineer, now an independent consultant, invited both women to a fireside chat on founder resilience. The room tensed as their divergent philosophies revealed themselves. Rachel spoke with magnetic charm about the need for decisive leadership and bold pivots, thinly veiled justifications for sacrifice and betrayal. Claire, unmoved, spoke of the cost of blind ambition and the imperative of building trust that can survive actual tests. Their verbal sparring was civil, but barely. Attendees murmured about the electricity between them. Some speculated if they had once been partners, or perhaps something deeper. Yet beneath the competitive veneer, a strange familiarity persisted. There were moments, the lingering glances as one left a stage, an almost smile during a particularly clever retort, when the old history bubbled through. Rachel especially seemed unable to fully abandon curiosity about Claire. In private, between meetings and negotiations, her voice sometimes softened, and the old cadence of their friendship, a raised eyebrow, a shared memory, surged briefly before vanishing under layers of self-protection. Perhaps it was Rachel who most felt the stakes. Claire's ability to rise, indeed, to reinvent herself, and challenge Rachel on every business front, forced Rachel into riskier deals. Industry observers noticed cracks. Walter's PR campaigns became more grandiose, but its internal culture grew tense, a fact Claire learned from new employees eager to join Nova Pulse's ascendant team instead. Meanwhile, Claire was careful, never letting victory breed arrogance. She remembered what hubris had cost her in New York. Despite their rivalry, their fates were tethered. Investors who bet on one would compare them to the other. Boardrooms would debate whose metrics were real, whose vision would last. Anonymous tipsters leaked tidbits from Rachel's camp to Claire, and vice versa, sparking a cold war of corporate maneuvering. But underneath all the strategic maneuvers lay something more personal, an undercurrent of betrayal, of love warped into rivalry, of ambition curdled into vendetta. Each encounter was a game of chess, layered atop years of shared history. Sometimes, in the privacy of her San Francisco apartment, Claire wondered if any of it, victories, losses, vengeful satisfaction, was truly enough to balance the ledger of their broken friendship. The encounters would only intensify as Nova Pulse and Walter grew, each confrontation stripping away a layer of pretense. At an international summit, Claire delivered a keynote on ethical AI, her reputation soaring as a new generation of founders idolized her resilience. Rachel watched from the audience, her facade unbroken, but her eyes sharp and restless. When they did speak alone, at a late-night balcony overlooking the city's glittering expanse, Rachel's words carried a quiver impossible to mask. You know, sometimes I wonder how things would have turned out if we'd stayed together, if we'd just trusted one another a little more. Claire met her gaze, cool and resolute. Trust is earned after you've seen what people do when it's tested. I'll never forget that again. In those moments, it was clear San Francisco was too small and ambition too fierce for both their stories to remain separate for long. Their confrontations, always marked by public civility and private intensity, became defining dramas of the tech world. To all who watched, one thing became certain: fate, ambition, and the echoes of betrayal had woven their destinies together, pushing them ever closer to an inevitable reckoning that neither could avoid. The price of betrayal. Thunderstorms rolled off the Pacific, painting the San Francisco skyline in gleaming streaks of silver, as Claire Dawson prepared for the moment she had both feared and anticipated since the night she fled New York. 3 years of meticulous building, self-reinvention, and strategic restraint had led her here, not just back into the tech world spotlight, but standing at the precipice of a reckoning. She moved through each day with methodical resolve, carrying the scars and lessons of her past like both armor and ammunition. Nova Pulse was now a household name on both coasts, its software quietly empowering thousands of small businesses. Its founder known for delivering results and never sacrificing her values for a quick gain. But even as the company grew, Claire never let herself become complacent. She had seen how swiftly trust could be weaponized, how quickly alliances could morph into knives in the back. She surrounded herself with people she handpicked for their ethics and loyalty, oversaw every legal document herself, and never, ever let sentiment cloud her judgment. The final trigger for unraveling the past came in the most Silicon Valley of ways: a data leak. Someone tipped off Nova Pulse about irregularities in Vaulter's practices, improper data collection, manipulated user numbers, and a suspicious pattern of suppressing whistleblowers. Claire, who had once instinctively recoiled from any hint of vengefulness, now regarded such events not as cruel twists of fate, but opportunities for truth to surface. She quietly assembled an alliance. Former Empowerly engineers disgruntled by Rachel's autocratic management, Bay Area lawyers skilled in intellectual property disputes, and ethical hackers whose expertise could trace the digital fingerprints buried behind shell companies and backdoor deals. Bit by bit, they gathered evidence: emails, document revisions, bank transfers. Each thread led back to Rachel, her thirst for dominance now spelling her undoing. Claire was determined not to stoop to scandal-mongering or public spectacle. Every confrontation would be waged legally, ethically, and with inexorable precision. Armed with proof that Rachel had not only stolen Empowerly from her, but had also exploited regulatory loopholes and misled investors, Claire set the final phase into motion. A major shareholder meeting for Vaulter, timed deliberately just before a high-profile product launch. The atmosphere in the sleek, glassy boardroom was electric. Venture capitalists shuffled their papers, senior engineers whispered rumors, and Rachel sat at the head of the table, elegant, unruffled, but fighting the tiniest quiver of unease she could not mask from Claire's studied gaze. Claire's legal team presented the findings. Facts were laid bare, contracts signed in bad faith, intellectual property misappropriated, voting rights manipulated, and whistleblower complaints covered up. Every move Rachel had once wielded for gain now returned to her as weaponized truth. For the first time, Rachel lost control of the narrative. Board members clamored for answers. Regulators initiated formal investigations. Investors who had trusted Rachel's charisma now questioned every decision. The room turned cold as support evaporated, replaced by legal logic and fiduciary duty. During a recess, Rachel found herself alone with Claire for the first time in years. No spectators, no passive-aggressive applause, just the echo of thunder outside and the low hum of computers that might as well have been back in that cramped Manhattan apartment where Empowerly began. Rachel's facade cracked. "You couldn't leave it alone, could you?" she whispered, voice tight, with a mixture of disbelief and wounded pride. "After all these years, was it worth it?" Claire's answer was measured, unyielding. "You taught me what betrayal means, but you also taught me what real accountability is. It's not personal, Rachel. It's what you earned." Rachel's removal was swift and public. The board's decision was unanimous. Her assets were frozen, her media privileges revoked, and lawsuits followed swiftly on the heels of bad press. Overnight, Rachel's empire crumbled. Vaulter's valuation plummeted, and former allies abandoned her in favor of self-preservation. For days, the tech press traded fresh headlines. Rachel Miller, ousted amid scandal. Vaulter faces SEC inquiry for fraud. Power duo's final fall, a cautionary tale. What was more haunting for Rachel than even her professional ruin was the unraveling of her personal world. Friends she had accumulated over years vanished. Business partners took down photos, deleted LinkedIn connections, and denied comment to reporters. Family members, long kept at a distance by Rachel's relentless ambitions, responded with silence or stiff condolences. The spotlight, once her favorite companion, now exposed everything she had worked so hard to conceal. For Claire, this was a slow-burning vindication. But it was never about public gloating. She avoided interviews, citing Nova Pulse's mission, and refusing to be drawn into the drama of Rachel's fall. For Claire, closure was quieter, mentoring a new generation of women founders, distributing part of her legal winnings to support whistleblowers, and implementing company policies that guaranteed transparency and fairness above all. Yet, victory had its own cost. In quieter moments, after a long day spent guiding Nova Pulse through yet another round of scaling, Claire sometimes found herself sifting through old photos, snapshots of a friendship before the poison set in. There was regret, but no nostalgia. She accepted the strange emotional calculus that true justice rarely brings the neat satisfaction of fiction. Betrayal had marked her, tempered her, but it had not defined her end. Her team noticed a new gravity to her leadership. She was as kind as ever, but never naive. Trust for Claire was now something to be built brick by hard-won brick. The past was not a burden, but a reservoir. Its scars reminders of just how high the price could be for believing in the wrong person, and how much further one could rise after surviving heartbreak. Years later, when Nova Pulse was listed as one of the most ethical startups in America, journalists still probed for details about Claire's origins. She kept her answers spare, focused on the future. If asked about Rachel, she'd only say, "Some lessons are learned the hard way. I wish her peace." The legend of Claire Dawson outgrew the tragedy of Emily Carter. She became a quiet symbol for integrity in an industry often poisoned by unchecked ego, a reassurance to others that while the cost of betrayal is steep, those willing to learn, adapt, and fight for justice can ultimately emerge far stronger than before. In the end, Claire didn't just survive the price of betrayal, she paid it in full and built an extraordinary life with the change.